How does a man quietly built on 20 years of hip-hop credibility watch his entire reputation get rewritten inside a single week of timeline posts? Ask Papoose. No diss record, no viral freestyle, no surprise project. Comment by comment, reply by reply, screenshot by screenshot. In a span of days, a name that moved through the culture with a certain kind of silent weight suddenly became the punchline of every boxing page, every gossip thread, every group chat in the city. And the strange part isn't the noise itself. The strange part is that most of the noise didn't even sound like him. Welcome back. Markets Hale here, and today we are peeling back one of the messiest public unravelings hip-hop and boxing have shared in years. Because what's happening on Papoose's page right now is not a beef. It's not a moment. It's not a phase. It's a live demonstration of what occurs when two separate empires collide in public without a strategy, without a filter, and without anyone in the room willing to say, pump the brakes. Let's rewind before the chaos, because the context is everything. Papoose didn't arrive in hip-hop yesterday. He built his name through the mixtape era, through the era when a rapper's currency was bars, not followers. He stacked cosigns from legends, walked into freestyle booths the way most people walk into their living rooms, and earned the kind of respect that lives in the mouths of DJs, producers, and old heads long after the algorithm moves on. He was never the biggest commercial act, he was never the #1 streaming artist, but inside the circles that actually protect the culture, his name carried weight. And not just with fans either. Women respected him, peers respected him, the streets respected him. That's the kind of reputation you can't buy, you can't fake, and you can't rush. It takes decades, and once it's yours, it becomes the only real asset an artist ever truly owns. Now compare that to what the timeline is showing this week. Posts flying out of his account that read like somebody else is driving, back and forth with random women, shots at strangers, body comments, intelligence jabs, energy that feels wired, reactive, off balance. Nobody who followed Papoose for 20 years recognizes that voice. That is not the cadence of the man who used to spit 30-bar freestyles about discipline and patience. Something shifted, and the shift is so loud that even casual observers are stopping mid-scroll to ask the same question out loud. Who is actually holding that phone? Because the behavior doesn't match the man, and the man doesn't match the moment. Here is where the real story begins. The whispers turned into a full-volume conversation, and the name attached to those whispers is Claressa Shields. People online are openly saying she's the one operating the page, answering the replies, pressing send on the shots. And whether that's fully accurate or partially accurate or simply the loudest theory, the damage is already locked in. Because once the public decides a story makes sense, they stop looking for the other version. Perception becomes the product. And the product currently being sold is that a legendary lyricist has handed over the keys to his own brand to a partner whose competitive instincts don't know how to turn off when the camera is on her. That's the first crack, and it's a deep one. But Papoose had to survive something even heavier before this moment. And that's the complete rewrite of how the public sees his legacy. 20 years of carefully stacked reputation can be undone by one weekend of screenshots. That's not exaggeration, that's how modern fame works. The average listener doesn't remember what you rapped in 2006, they remember what your page looked like this morning. And right now, the page looks chaotic, it looks reactive, it looks like a man arguing with strangers instead of standing on the legacy he spent his entire adult life building. That disconnect between the artist people knew and the account people are seeing is the exact place where trust collapses. Then the situation escalated into something bigger than a couple of messy posts. Claressa Shields and Alycia Baumgardner got tangled into a running feud that has nothing to do with the press conference and everything to do with personal temperature. One comment pulls another comment. One reply triggers another reply. And suddenly the conversation that should have been about Alicia's upcoming fight against Shin this Friday turns into a non-stop soap opera about who can squabble, who can't squabble, who's clout chasing, who's embarrassing themselves. The fight got swallowed by the drama. The sport got swallowed by the spectacle. And the people who genuinely love women's boxing are watching their own sport become background noise in a reality show nobody asked for. Here's what most people are missing about this cycle. Alycia Baumgardner is walking into a real fight in a matter of days. That should be the only storyline. That should be the sun every other moon orbits around. Instead, the energy coming from Claressa's direction is constant, personal, and pointed. Every public shot aimed at Alycia is a shot that doesn't get aimed at an actual opponent Claressa could be preparing for. And fans on every platform are connecting the dots out loud. If the smoke is this real, why isn't it pointed at Remy Ma, where the actual tension has been simmering for months? Why is the volume turned up on Alycia, who's about to step into a ring and risk her health, while the person who keeps getting a name dropped in the background gets left completely alone? The math isn't mathing, and the internet is allergic to math that doesn't math. Then came the moment that flipped the whole thing from beef to clown show. People started joking that the entire situation could have been handled over a plate of food. The Red Lobster line started trending, folks quoting it, remixing it, turning it into a whole genre of comments. It stopped being a confrontation and became a meme, and memes are the most ruthless judge in the culture. The moment your conflict becomes comedy, you've already lost control of the narrative, because the public isn't scared of you anymore. They're entertained by you, and entertainment without respect is the slowest form of career death there is. But let's zoom out. Because the personal drama is only the surface. The deeper story is what this whole episode is exposing about image management in 2026. Papoose spent 20 years keeping his name clean. No scandals, no viral arguments, no public meltdowns. That wasn't an accident. That was discipline. That was a man who understood that in hip-hop, the only thing more valuable than a hit record is a reputation that doesn't need defending. And now, in the space of a few weeks, that reputation is being spent faster than any record could ever replace it. Every post is a withdrawal from an account he spent 2 decades depositing into. And at the current rate, the balance is dropping fast. Now apply the same lens to Claressa. She is, by almost every objective measure, the greatest women's boxer of her generation. Olympic gold, undisputed championships, historic moments across multiple weight classes. Her resume is not up for debate. But resumes don't live in headlines anymore. Headlines live in headlines. And right now, her headlines aren't about her next fight, her next title defense, or her next piece of history. Her headlines are about who she's replying to, who she's arguing with, who she's posting about. The most accomplished fighter in her division is becoming a content subject instead of a sports story. And that shift, once it happens, is almost impossible to reverse. Here's where people start asking the uncomfortable question. Is the public even talking about the music anymore? Is anyone refreshing streaming apps waiting for a new Papoose project? Is anyone breaking down his bars line by line on podcasts? Or has the entire conversation pivoted away from the art and into the argument? Because that's the trade nobody warns you about. When you let drama become your main broadcast, your actual work becomes a rerun. The audience doesn't quit you, they just stop showing up for the thing that made you respect you in the first place. And that silent departure is 1,000 times more dangerous than a loud cancellation. Same question applies to Claressa. Is the public anticipating her next bout? Is the boxing community dissecting her footwork, her combinations, her next move up or down in weight? Or are they scrolling her page, waiting for the next heated response? Because the two audiences are not the same. The audience that came for the sport is different from the audience that came for the spectacle. And when one audience gets bigger than the other, the smaller one walks out the door quietly. You don't realize they're gone until you need them for a pay-per-view buy, a sponsorship negotiation, a legacy conversation. Then the silence hits. Now let's get into the part that really lit the internet on fire, the money. Because once finances enter a public conversation, the conversation never leaves. Claressa came out and said clearly that Papoose doesn't touch her money. Okay, fair, stated, heard. But the internet doesn't just hear things, the internet does math. And the math started immediately. If she's sitting on the kind of purses championship boxers pull, why is there a mortgage still being mentioned? Why is there talk about him handling the house note? Why are there references to big checks, big deposits, $3 million bonuses, while the day-to-day bills are being split in a way that doesn't line up with the flex? the numbers in the captions don't match the numbers in the conversation, and that gap is where speculation moves in and never leaves. Then you add the lifestyle footage on top of the financial contradictions: shopping hauls, jewelry drops, luxury bags, designer everything from the hair to the boots, Gucci this, Louis that. And right next to those clips are casual mentions of car notes, household expenses, ongoing payments. People look at that and say, wait, if the bag is that big, why is the bill still there? If the bonus hit the account, why is the mortgage breathing down anybody's neck? Those aren't hateful questions, those are logical questions. And in 2026, logical questions turn into viral threads within hours. The public isn't judging, they're just calculating. But calculation in public is its own kind of judgment, and it never comes out soft. Here's the contradiction that keeps the whole thing burning. On one side of the narrative, he's positioned as a provider, the one covering the big-ticket items, the one making sure the household keeps running. On the other side, he's positioned as someone who takes nothing from her earnings, nothing from her deals, nothing from her business. Both can be true at once, but when both are claimed at once publicly, the audience doesn't separate them, they stack them. They ask, okay, if he provides and takes nothing, where is his income engine? Music? Touring, features, business partnerships? Because if none of those are visible at scale, the equation starts to feel incomplete. And incomplete equations are exactly what the internet spends its afternoons trying to solve out loud. Then there's the percentage talk, the management talk, the behind-the-scenes talk, the rumors about splits, about structure, about who gets what slice of which deal. None of it is confirmed. Most of it is pure speculation. But once speculation hits social platforms, it stops being speculation and starts being framing. And framing is what people carry with them into every future interview, every future fight, every future album drop. The narrative becomes the lens, and no amount of denial can fully reshape a lens once it's been said. And this is the quiet tragedy of the whole situation. Every single minute the conversation spends on money, replies, screenshots, and squabbles is a minute that doesn't spend on the things that actually built both of them. Claressa's fight IQ, Papoose's pen game, her resume inside the ropes, his catalog inside the booth. Those are the real assets. Those are the foundations. And foundations don't get stronger when you throw parties on top of them. They get weaker. What we are watching right now is two people standing on top of their own foundations and stomping, wondering why the floor keeps shaking. Let's talk about the psychology of public pairings, because this is where most people in entertainment get it wrong. The moment two names become one name in the public mind, both names start to lose individual weight. Say Papoose now. The next thought is Claressa. Say Claressa, the next thought is Papoose. That linkage can be a beautiful thing when both brands are elevating, but it becomes a liability the second the energy turns turbulent. Because now every stumble by one becomes a headline for the other. Every misstep ags both. Every controversy doubles in weight because it travels on two backs instead of one. That is the cost of merging brands without protecting the individual engines that power them. And here's where the lesson from quieter, more strategic couples in entertainment becomes impossible to ignore. Beyoncé and Jay-Z spent decades perfecting the art of appearing together only when the appearance added value to both. They argued privately, resolved privately, and when they did speak publicly, they spoke through art, not with captions. Ciara and Russell Wilson move with a similar discipline. Even when they post, the posts are curated, intentional, additive. Contrast that with what's happening now, where every impulse seems to hit the timeline before it hits the conversation between the two of them. That impulse-first posting style is the loudest signal that the house doesn't have a communication strategy. And in 2026, a couple without a communication strategy is a couple handing their narrative over to strangers. Here's another layer people are sleeping on. There's a real question about whether boundaries were set and then ignored. If one partner said something in private, like, let's not engage with this, and then posts fly out anyway under the same name, that's not a couple issue anymore. That's a trust issue playing out in front of millions. And trust issues don't stay private once they appear in the public feed. They get studied, quoted, replayed, and screenshotted forever. The Internet Archive doesn't delete anything. Not your best bars, not your worst replies. Everything lives side by side, and your legacy becomes whichever side the public quotes more often. Now, there's also the mental game happening right before a major fight. Boxing is not just physical, it is surgically mental. The opponent standing across from Alycia Baumgardner this Friday, Shin, is not thinking about timelines. She is thinking about footwork, angles, counterpunches, and conditioning. Meanwhile, a significant portion of the public narrative around Alycia is being eaten not by a side feud with someone she isn't even fighting. That is a tax on her focus, a tax on her preparation, a tax on the emotional bandwidth she means to walk into that ring at 100%. Champions don't announce when they're being drained. But drain is drain, and it shows up in the later rounds whether anybody wants to admit it or not. And the same principle runs back across the street to Claressa. Every pound of energy she pours into timeline warfare is a pound of energy not poured into training, not poured into strategy, not poured into the next version of herself she's supposed to be building. Greatness and distraction cannot share the same schedule. One of them always eats the other. Always. And history is full of generational fighters who stayed elite in the ring, but lost the long game because the noise outside the ring got louder than the work inside of it. Nobody remembers the comeback they planned. They only remember the unraveling they broadcast. There's another quiet layer underneath all of this, and it's about the account itself. Multiple people watching the page have openly questioned whether Papoose is even the one typing. The phrasing doesn't match his history. The tone doesn't match his decades of interviews. The energy doesn't match the man who built his name on measured, deliberate delivery. And once that question exists in the public, it never fully disappears. From this point forward, every post from that handle will be read through a filter. Is this him? Is this her? Is this both? Is this somebody trying to clean up a mess that was started by somebody else? That filter is the ultimate brand killer, because a brand only works when the audience trusts who is behind it. If I were in that situation, the first move would be the most obvious one. Lock the account, change the password, separate the access. Release a clear, calm, one-paragraph statement about who speaks for what going forward. Not a rant, not a clapback, a boundary. Because every additional hour the current energy stays live is another hour of withdrawals from an account that was built on 20 years of deposits. Discipline is the only thing that can stop a downward spiral, and discipline starts with silence before it starts with strategy. Now let's land the point that everything in this situation has been pointing toward from the beginning. The person you stand next to becomes part of the story people tell about you. That's not a judgment. That's a physics law of public life. Whether you want it or not, your partner's posture becomes part of your posture in the mind of the audience. Their calm becomes your calm. Their chaos becomes your chaos. Their wins add to your column. Their losses get scored against your name, too. That's the deal you sign the moment you go public as a pair. And nobody hands you a copy of the contract before you sign it. You only find out the terms when the storm arrives. And this is where both Papoose and Claressa have to make a decision, separately and together, because the current trajectory is not sustainable for either brand. A rapper known for lyrical integrity cannot survive a long run of petty timeline energy. A champion known for historic accomplishments cannot survive becoming a running content subject instead of a sports story. The math eats both columns at the same time. The only way to reset is to step back, reclaim the individual identities, and let the pairing support the careers instead of consuming them. That's not a criticism. That's a blueprint. And blueprints only work when somebody picks them up and actually builds from them. Think of it this way. Reputation is not a bank account that refills automatically. Reputation is a bucket with a small hole in the bottom. Every single day, a little bit of respect leaks out just from the passage of time. The only way to keep the bucket full is to keep pouring new proof into it. Proof of work, proof of discipline, proof of craft, proof of character. When the leaks become floods, no amount of pouring can catch up. And right now, that bucket is losing more than either of them is replacing. The scoreboard is visible to everyone except, it seems, the two people whose names are on it. Here's the hard truth most people want to avoid saying out loud. And this is the part nobody in either camp probably wants to hear, but it's the part that matters the most. Most entertainers spend their careers as employees of their own image. The label writes the narrative. The manager writes the schedule. The partner writes the caption. The fans write the perception. And somewhere in the middle of all that writing, the actual person disappears, leaving only a silhouette the internet argues about. Papoose spent 2 decades avoiding that trap. Claressa spent her entire career swinging her way out of that trap 1 round at a time. And now, in the strangest twist of all, they might be walking each other straight back into it, 1 post at a time, while the rest of us watch in real time. The real question isn't who runs the page. The real question isn't who pays the mortgage. The real question isn't who took who to Red Lobster. The real question is this: who in this pairing is watching the long game and who is reacting to the short game? Because only one of those people survives the next decade with their brand intact. And right now, from the outside looking in, it's genuinely hard to tell which seat either of them is sitting in. That uncertainty is the most expensive thing in the entire situation, because uncertainty is what sponsors flee from, what promoters hesitate around, and what fans eventually walk away from. And here's the part that history will remember. Every single public figure eventually faces a moment where the choice is between protecting the brand or feeding the emotion. Protecting the brand almost always feels unsatisfying in the short term. It feels like losing. It feels like letting people talk without clapping back. It feels like weakness wearing a suit. But protecting the brand is the only move that compounds over time. Feeding the emotion feels incredible for about 45 seconds, and then the receipts live forever. That is the trade. And most people trade wrong again and again, because the short term always shouts louder than the long term ever will. So, where does this go from here? That depends entirely on which version of each of them shows up next week. The measured version or the reactive version, the strategic version or the impulsive version, the legacy version or the timeline version. Both paths are still available, neither door has closed yet, but every day that passes without a correction makes the correction harder, and every post that lands without a filter makes the next post easier to send. Momentum is a quiet killer. It works in your favor until it doesn't, and then it works against you with the exact same patience it used to build you. I want to hear directly from you now. Do you think the page is really being run by Papoose, or is somebody else steering the ship? Do you believe the financial story being told publicly, or do the numbers raise more questions than they answer? And most importantly, can both of these names recover what they've spent this month, or is this the beginning of a permanent shift in how the culture sees them? Drop your honest take in the comments. Hit that like button if this breakdown added something to the way you're seeing the situation. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next deep dive, and share this video with the person you know is going to have the strongest opinion about it. We keep the conversation sharp, we keep it honest, we keep it grounded, and we keep it moving forward every time. See you all on the very next one soon enough.